Blackadder TV series review. So this is part of what I'm calling my television addiction series, where I go through and I talk about all the TV shows I watched in 2011 and 2012 when I was living in Cambodia and was watching way too much TV because of all the cheap DVD TV box sets they sell in Cambodia. For more information on exactly what this series is or why I'm doing it, you can check out the video and the link in the description down below. But yeah, moving on to Blackadder. Excuse my voice. I must have talked myself out today. I've been teaching online again today. And also, excuse this video. This is another one where I really don't have a lot of intelligent things to say about Blackadder, but I'll try and talk through it a little bit nonetheless. I'm going to talk through this from the perspective of an American. So if you're British watching this, don't expect to hear anything new. I'm just going to go over the bare basics. Either don't watch this video if you're British, or watch this video just for the purposes of telling me everything I got wrong or commenting on stuff I left out. But as an American, I remember hearing the name Blackadder in the 90s. I don't ever remember it being something anybody watched, but it was a name I would recognize. Like catalogs, maybe selling DVDs, would mention Blackadder alongside of Monty Python or other popular British TV series. But it's something that I first started to notice when I lived abroad for the first time, when I was in Japan, and noticed how much Blackadder would come up in conversation among my British friends. So living abroad, even though I was in Japan, it meant I was mixing in with the expatriate group, which means I was hanging out with people from Australia and England and New Zealand and South Africa and the whole expatriates. Excuse me. So that's something that clued me into maybe what a big deal this TV series had been among British people. Now, I first moved to Japan in 2001. So I was hanging out with a generation of people who were the same age as me, people who had been children in the 80s and then kind of teenagers in the 90s. And I think maybe that particular generation of British people had been particularly affected by Blackadder because it was on TV in Britain in the 80s. I wonder if I was hanging out with a group of young British people today, if it would come up as much in conversation. Maybe, I don't know, but with British people my age, it certainly seemed to have made a mark. And I would catch references and stuff to it. A number of things started to intrigue me about it. One is it was historical comedy, and I really like historical fiction. And second, it appeared to be where a lot of big British comedians had gotten their start. Rowan Atkinson is most famous in America for Mr. Bean. In fact, he's most famous almost everywhere in the world for Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean is incredibly popular in Japan and Cambodia and Vietnam and all the Asian countries I've lived in. But I think in Britain, Blackadder, not Mr. Bean, is what Rowan Atkinson is most known for. Also, Hugh Laurie, who in America was well known for being on House and a few other things. And Stephen Fry. These people, I think, all got their starts or all became known through this Blackadder TV series. Now, the TV series, from an American perspective, is a little bit funny because I think they just conceive of TV differently in Britain. They don't have TV shows that just run on forever and ever. They have a TV show and they will do a series of it, and the series will run for like 6 episodes or 8 episodes, or it'll be a really short series, and then the TV show will be done. And maybe it'll come up for a new series, and maybe that new series will be the next year, or maybe it will be in a couple years. It's just different to the idea of American TV. And I mention that because this Blackadder thing confused me for a long time when I was trying to make heads or tails about what the show was actually about. But that's because I was thinking about it in terms of American TV. It was, in Britain, a series, 4 different series, and there could be as much of a gap as 3 years in between series, where you finish a series and the series was done, and then you wait about 3 years till you decide that you want to make another series or something like that. And each series is actually like its own TV show. They have a different cast, different characters. There is some continuity of actors and characters, but each one, but there is some difference as well. And each one takes place in a different time period. So the first one takes place in the time period right after I believe it's the death of Richard III. And it's sort of like this fictional time period between when Richard III dies and between when Henry VII comes over. And yeah, I don't exactly remember. It's something about Richard's 2 sons, or maybe it was the 2 princes in the tower who actually hadn't died, or something like that. But there was some fictional king who doesn't really exist, was living during that time, and Blackadder was a member of his court. But then the next one, the next series, which doesn't happen until 3 years later, what wasn't produced until 3 years later, is during Queen Elizabeth. And then the next one is during the Regency period. And then the next one is during World War I. So in each one, it's kind of vaguely the same characters, but they're playing reincarnations, or they're playing like the descendants of the character. So like the Blackadder in series 2 is kind of like the descendant of the Blackadder in series 1, or the reincarnation, or however you want to imagine it. And so each series has to almost be taken independently. You wouldn't want to pick up series 2 to kind of find out where the plot threads from series 1 have ended off. So I got the DVD set in Cambodia, and it's a bit strange. It was a very nice DVD box set, and they do this. And again, I mentioned this in one of my first videos on this series, but I believe that these pirated DVDs all come from China originally, and then are just kind of shipped down and distributed in Cambodia. So maybe this is something that originates in China, but some of them are just, like some cover art in a plastic sleeve in a bag. But some of them are like proper box sets, like you would find buying DVDs back in America or in a Western country. And this was one of them. It was, a nice cardboard box set, and you opened it up, and it was much more elaborate than it needed to be, considering it was just a pirated DVD set. And I don't know why exactly they do that. They did that with some of the DVDs that they wanted to have like an official look for whatever reason. Maybe because Blackadder was prestigious enough or famous enough. Not for Americans necessarily, but for British people living in Cambodia or Southeast Asia. And there are a lot of British people out there. Anyways, it was all 4 series in one big box set. The first series was not very funny. It's kind of watchable, but it's not great. And I think this is acknowledged by everybody. It's acknowledged by its fans in Britain. It's acknowledged by the people who made the show. That the first series, they hadn't quite figured out what they were doing yet, so it's not great. In fact, you probably shouldn't watch the first series. I watched it under the mistaken belief that I needed to kind of watch everything in order to follow the storyline and to understand everything. But there is no like one great storyline that follows everything through. You can safely skip the first series. Second and third series, the one with Queen Elizabeth and the one with the Prince Regent, are much better. I think this is back in Britain where the show is regarded as hitting its golden age. I regret to say that this elaborately looking box set I got in Cambodia, the DVDs started skipping on series 2 and 3. So there are some episodes I just wasn't able to watch, which is unfortunate because I think that's supposed to be the best of the series. But I did actually watch most of them, some of them, half of them, I don't know. And what I saw was good, watchable, quite funny in places. I didn't quite... I don't know. I didn't think it was all that funny. In other words, after years of hearing this TV series praised so much by my British friends, I thought it was okay, but not the funniest thing ever. I don't know, maybe that's just me as an American, or maybe that is perhaps that this series was on in the 80s, and perhaps humor has moved on since then. Because I think humor or tastes in humor do change through the years. I mean, you watch some American sitcoms from the 1980s and you're like, oh, what is this? This isn't funny at all. I don't know if the British person would agree with that. I mean, it does have some funny jokes, but it's not the funniest thing ever. Yeah. And then the last one is World War I, which I think the humor is much the same as the previous two series, which is pretty good. But there's a lot more social commentary in this one, in which they're making comments on, because World War I was a very kind of horrible, pointless, useless war. And so they're making a lot of comments about the uselessness or pointlessness of the war, which culminates in the very final episode of Series 4, which I suppose I shouldn't give away the way the final episode ends, but it's very poignant, and I'm given to understand that this is something British people remember. I read somewhere, or somebody told me once, that final episode was even shown in British schools when they were doing lessons on World War I. Not that it has any real historical value, but just maybe as a commentary on the pointlessness of that war, or the tragedy of that war. So in that respect, the one in World War I can be construed either as anti-World War I, or maybe more broadly as anti-war in general. And so the themes of it are a little bit heavier, but it's also, I think, more meaningful, the Series 4. And that's really all I have to say about Blackadder. So if you're an American like me and you haven't checked it out, skip the first series. No reason to watch the first series. Second, third, and fourth series, if you can track them down, are... well, it's not the funniest thing ever. I could easily say they're just worth watching because they appear to have been such a big piece of British culture over the past 30 years or whatever. So you could easily watch them for that reason. But it's not terrible either. It's not funny. It's worth a chuckle. It's worth watching if you can track them down.